You're now watching Sports Bettor's Paradise on the Bet Rivers Network.
All right, Jimmy and Paul Stone, it's our best bets. We do the high-profile games, the games that most people are going to be watching, the highly ranked matchups and things like that. Our big volume teams here on Bet Rivers. And now it's time to get to our best bets. Paul, you start first. We're looking at Minnesota USC, Big Ten matchup. Trojans are 8-51 on the road in Minneapolis, St. Paul. USC was lifeless, down 21-10 in the third quarter, receiving a punt. Wisconsin fumbles the punt, and that opened up the floodgates, and it was 28-0 for the Trojans in the second half. Same thing for Minnesota. Started slow, 24-3, got it all the way to 27-24, recover the onside kick. They've got a shot, and a flat-out made-up call against the Gophers. Offsides, and the cardinal sin of officiating, anticipating infractions. Let it happen before you call it. That costs the Gophers a chance. Gophers +8 here at home against the Trojans.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Jimmy, Southern Cal, they trailed Wisconsin 21-10 at halftime this past weekend, rallied for a 38-21 victory over the Gophers, and they were done in a little bit by turnovers. The Trojans had three turnovers, 3 against Minnesota. They've committed a total of 5 in their last 2 games, so they need to cut out those turnovers. From their perspective. Minnesota, meanwhile, as you mentioned, they made a frantic comeback. They fell behind 24-3 going into the fourth quarter, pulled within 27-24 on a 12-yard touchdown pass from Max Brosmer to Daniel Jackson with 1:37 to go. You mentioned the onside kick that they recovered that was then controversially negated due to an offside penalty against the Gophers, which is since caused the Big Ten to reconsider their alignment of officials on onside kick attempts. So they did bring some change there, but they get the loss nonetheless. Minnesota now 2-3 on the season, 0-2 in conference play. So they're in desperation mode. They need a victory. There's never really a silver lining in a defeat, but they might have gained a little bit of confidence in that comeback effort in the fourth quarter there in Ann Arbor this past weekend. But what I really like most here is USC head coach Lincoln Riley as a road favorite. He has not been good as a road favorite dating back to 2021, which was his last season at Oklahoma. Riley only 2-10 against the spread as a road favorite in his last 12 games in that role. Also, the Trojans, they have a pretty big game on deck next week. They're going to be going to Happy Valley to play Penn State. So they could have one eye to the east, so to speak. I think Minnesota is going to keep it within a touchdown, try to kind of muck it up, keep it tight. I like the Gophers +8.
I'll be on the Gophers as well in that game. Let's go to the next one. This one of my picks, and that's Tennessee and Arkansas. Florida is not nearly what they used to be or what they should be. There's no question about that. But Tennessee and Florida is still a big deal. They got Florida next week, and then they host Alabama. So a couple of big games. Will they be peeking ahead just a little bit in this tricky little trip to Fayetteville? Arkansas, same old stuff, man. They're competitive, but they lose. But they cover against Texas A&M. That script seems to be the same. It's going to be different to trying to handicap that game when they go on campus instead of in Jerry World. But they're competitive. No doubt they should have beat Oklahoma State, where they outgained them by over 250 yards in Stillwater. And Sam Pittman is the focus of a lot of discussion, whether or not he should stay or should he not. Is he... this is one of those lower half resource programs in the SEC, like Ole Miss as well. Kiffin getting a little criticism, but my goodness, Kiffin only has the best winning conference winning percentage over 3 years since Johnny Vaught, since 1962. So remember who you are, Ole Miss. But anyway, getting back to Arkansas and Tennessee, and I think Arkansas needs to remember who they are as well. So Pittman is doing a nice job. He's a stand-up guy as well. Be careful if you want to promote the guy waiting in the wings in Bobby Petrino. Bobby Petrino is doing exactly what Bobby Petrino does best: coach offenses and keep it at that. Not much of a leader. But anyway, +13 on the road. I love Tennessee. Tennessee has got a shot to win it all. Their defense is that good. His defense is as good as there is in the country. The defense is better than Alabama's this year. It's better than Georgia's in all likelihood, and maybe better than Texas as well. And Nico is going to, how much he progresses, how much they lean on him, that remains to be seen. They really didn't ask much of him on that first road start in Norman, and they kind of let the defense, and they just got out of there with the win. Smart. Why take unnecessary risks when you got the game in hand against Oklahoma? Maybe a similar approach here and only a second true road start. So still pretty young on the road. I think Arkansas can stay within this one. I like Arkansas plus the 13 against the visiting Vols, especially with those two games they got the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think this sets up nicely for Arkansas and Tennessee. While we've thought of them, especially since Josh Heupel was hired a few years ago, as a offensive juggernaut, a team that plays fast and scores a lot of points. I mean, it's been the defense that's really vaulted them into a legitimate top 5 position this year. But the one way you can neutralize those defensive tackles and that push that they've been getting is with a running quarterback. So I think Taylor Green, the big 6'6", 230-pound quarterback for Arkansas, I've got to think Petrino's got a lot of designed runs planned for Green, and also some off-schedule runs where Green will decide to take up the field. I look for Taylor Green to have a big game, and I think this is a good opportunity for Arkansas to catch Tennessee in a little bit of a down spot.
All right. Don't forget that BetRivers players can play same-game parlays on college football and NFL games to earn squares. Our exclusive Squares game offers additional chances at profit boosts, bonus bets, and many $10,000 jackpots. Visit BetRivers.com or the BetRivers app for more details. All right, Paul, your next pick. We're going to Stillwater, Oklahoma. Oklahoma State, 3-64.5 against West Virginia. What is up with Ollie Gordon? 67 yards per game after, just a phenomenal year last year, and he didn't even have a full season as a starter. But, and even last week, 62 in the first quarter, 14 the rest of the game in the Little Apple against Kansas State. Well, we had Kansas State last week, and that cashed a ticket. But anyway, a little bit of pride on the line, a little bit of desperation on the line for a guy that hasn't lost, had a losing season since his very first one back 20 years ago, and that's Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State. And that's with Oklahoma State's entire offensive line returning. Talk about disappointing teams. They talk about Florida State and this and that. This is at the top of my list right now with Oklahoma State with so much experience and a proven head coach, continuity, the whole thing. Also remember that quote right before the season starts. Told the players publicly, hey, quit asking me about more NIL money. Season started now. That's beyond us. So who knows what's going on and what kind of conditioning? I don't know. But that running game, Ollie Gordon, whole offensive line back, that's expected to be kind of a given for Oklahoma State. It has not been. Oklahoma State, Paul, you're looking at the Cowboys to rally the troops here, the Pokes to rally the troops, minus the 3 at home against West Virginia.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jimmy. I mean, Oklahoma State undoubtedly one of the biggest disappointments, if not the biggest disappointment in the first month of the 2024 college football season. They return one of the most experienced teams overall. They've got experience at basically every position. They've got Ollie Gordon II, a 1,700-yard rusher, coming back to operate behind an offensive line that returns all 5 starters. A lot of career returning starts. One of the key contenders is that offensive line before the season anyway for the Joe Moore Award, symbolic of a nation's top offensive line. But just hadn't happened so far. They have failed to meet preseason expectations any way you slice it. You mentioned the Arkansas game, extremely fortunate. I'm still not sure how they won that game by 8 points in double overtime. Outgained by 250 yards, as you mentioned, more than 250 yards in that game. Now put itself in a hole. But they've lost their first 2 Big 12 games at home to Utah, on the road last week to Kansas State. And through 5 games, as you mentioned, Gordon only has 334 yards, 67 yards a game, only averaging 3.8 yards per carry this year after averaging 6.1 last year. So almost 2.5 yards per carry on average, less than last year. Just a head scratcher. Mike Gundy, he's that rare coach that I've always said gets more out of less. His teams always seem to exceed preseason expectations. They have no margin for error. I mean, this is a conference that's balanced. The Big 12, maybe not probable, but it's at least feasible that a 2-loss team could make the the championship game in that league. But this is it for the Cowboys. They got to fire their best shot. If they've got anything, any pride, anything left in the tank, they're going to use it this weekend against West Virginia. I like Oklahoma State minus the 3 over the Mountaineers.
All right, moving on to the SEC, and talking about people having realistic expectations. I mean, you've got to, and I mentioned Lane Kiffin, and he has gotten the most out of that program. But man, when you lose as a 2-touchdown favorite like they did against Kentucky, man, all of a sudden things were set up for them. They do what they're supposed to do. That's all they had to do. Do what they're supposed to do. They're going to get into the college football playoff. They got their work cut out for them. And now this game that was sort of supposed to be a layup against Kentucky, where the first plays were scripted. Lane Kiffin does an excellent job of scripting those plays. Great offensive mind anyway. Play designer, sequence guys, setting things up. But the first drive, Jackson Dart was 5 for 5 for 83 yards. After that, not nearly as much. And also, he always likes to run his quarterbacks. Dart only 13 rushes for 22 yards against that stingy Kentucky defense. Some people in the SEC think that Kentucky may be a little bit better or as good as Tennessee this year defensively in the league. But anyway, now they play a physical game where Kentucky leaned on them, 47 rushing attempts, that physical defensive front that gave them all kinds of problems. And now they play a team coming off a bye who has two guys who are going to be playing on Sunday coming off the edge in South Carolina, and a team that is one of the best pass protection teams in all of football, LSU, and they harassed Nussmeier in that game. Also, Sellers, their dual-threat quarterback, he is back. He got hurt in the middle of that LSU game. If he did not, they were going to win. It was just a matter of by how much. And now South Carolina at home, off a bye, healthy against Ole Miss. Kind of, all right. When you have a lot of those transfer portal guys, well, how do they handle adversity? Because they didn't expect to lose and go into this. Not only that, but the following week they go into Baton Rouge against LSU coming off of a bye as well. So this is going to be a tough 2-game. If Ole Miss is going to get back on track for the college football playoff, they're going to need these two. I don't think it's this week. I think the money line is really in play, plus 265. Carolina plus 9 is a real gift here. So love South Carolina plus the 9 at home against Ole Miss. Paul, Oregon State and Colorado State. So Oregon State 3-1. Their only loss was to Oregon and kind of fell apart in the second half. They were competitive for a half, and then they got into their depth. And Oregon may have played, probably was their best half of the season in that second half against Oregon State. Or Colorado State, we talked. They didn't put up much of a fight at all on the main high-profile game in Boulder against Colorado. Oregon State at home in Corvallis, 47.5, and they're doing it with a 1-2 rushing punch. Griffin, 103 a game and 4 TDs. Harverson, 93 a game and 7 more TDs. That's 200 a game and 11 TDs over 4 games. That's pretty damn good. That's nice thing. And keep in mind, they had a really good running game last year, and it kind of hid DJU in some of his deficiencies, because when he played action, he did have all the time in the world, and they didn't rely on his arm for their team's success as well. Paul, you're looking at the Beavers here. Got to check the C-Dub. Get the CW on your channel guide. That's where this one you could find on TV. Oregon State minus 11.
Yeah, I actually made Oregon State here a 15-point favorite, so I definitely see a little value on the Beavers side. Colorado State so far 2-2, a very uninspiring 2-2. Really got hammered in that Week 3 game at home in Fort Collins by Colorado. And at least some of their sluggish start certainly due to the just lack of availability of their top player, their standout receiver, Torrey Horton. He missed much of the game against Colorado, missed the entire game, their last game 2 weeks ago against Texas El Paso. Jay Norvell says Horton's going to play this week against Oregon State, but you have to wonder if he'll be at 100% against the Beavers. Horton had 96 catches for 1,136 yards last year, but only 10 catches for 120 yards through 4 games this year. Again, he's missed some time, and it'll be interesting to see how he shows up in this game on Saturday. But again, I do like Oregon State. They've been carried by that strong running game that you described. Those two backs, Jamius Griffin and Anthony Hankerson, combined for 785 yards through 4 games, so right at 200 yards a game, as you mentioned. And their quarterback also, Giovanni McCoy, the last couple of games, he's emerged as a real running threat. So I like the way they're running the football. Oregon State definitely needs a win to solidify their bowl chances. I think the Beavers going to win this one over Colorado State by 2 touchdowns or more. So I like Oregon State minus 11 over Colorado State.
I apologize. I called him Harvison. It's Hankerson. You score 7 TDs in 4 games. I got to get your name right. Come on now. I got to get better than that. Even a less than 100% Paul Stone would correct me on that one. Let's go to the ACC. Tobacco Road. Did you see that emotion? It's not just Carolina Duke on the hardwood, but on the gridiron last week. How about that in North Carolina? That's a bad loss. 14-0 and cruising after giving up 70 to James Madison. They're pitching a shutout into the second half, and then that momentum, you don't think it's real? It's real. Once that thing got going for Duke's way, and they settled for those 2 field goals to go at 20-0, it was all Duke. Well, you know what that means. You leave a little emotion on that field one week, you're that much lighter in the tank the following week. Duke is 5-0. They have trailed in 3 of those games in the fourth quarter. So that Friday night miracle on the soccer field on the Lake Michigan in Evanston, I mean, down this past week 20-0 in the second half to UNC. So, I mean, they have really been fortunate. And UConn, that's right, another basketball powerhouse. UConn, they were trailing in the fourth quarter as well. The clock is going to strike 12. Let's face it. Georgia Tech coming off of a bye, rested, ready to play, and also just thinking and just easy coaching opportunity for Georgia Tech because they left points and they left maybe that game on the field with their mistakes. They made all kinds of mistakes, and the biggest one, trying to make it a less than a touchdown game with a field goal attempt in the fourth quarter, block, scoop, score. Thanks for shopping. We lose at plus 11. They lose by 12. So, yes, I'm chasing money a little bit, but I'm also chasing this Duke team that this is not sustainable. Hey, congratulations. You win total bets. You already hit you over with the Blue Devils, but this thing is not sustainable. Yellow Jackets at home, and I love Haynes King and what he's become, a true dual threat. That allows your offensive play call to have all kinds of fun, both with him and his legs and his arm. Jackets in a big way, minus 9.5 at home against Duke, Paul.
Yeah, like you. I mean, I'm a big Haynes King fan. He's the leader of that team. He sets the tone. He's a tough guy. He's just kind of a bulldog, you know. So Georgia Tech, as you mentioned, that was a tough loss a couple of weeks ago at Louisville, but they were very competitive, obviously, with the Cardinals. And they're not going to win the ACC, obviously, but I still think Georgia Tech's going to play a role here. And like you said, Duke's good fortunes. Those things seem to typically regress to the mean. So I like your Georgia Tech play as well. I think they could win that one by double digits.
All right, last pick of the weekend on our best bets. We go to the Commander-in-Chief trophy. And, boy, Air Force got to own this for a little bit of a stretch. But, man, Air Force is just not what they've been. And, man, the things flip quickly. And, you know, we talked about Navy, whether it's a Malcolm Perry or Keenan Reynolds, those electric quarterbacks. You got to have a good quarterback. Well, they had this guy on the roster last year, but he is way improved. Kai Horvath, man. How about him? 160 yards a game passing, 7 TDs and 1 interception. Also 112 rushing a game and 8 more TDs, averaging 9.6 yards a carry. Navy, the middies are 46, have a scoring 46 a game. That's 9th in the nation in scoring. You know it's bad if Air Force, if there's 135 or so Division I teams and you're 276 in scoring. That's not good. So it is really flipped. The total, 36, Navy may get that by themselves. Navy, 10.5 over 36 in one play. And, well, whenever you have one of these unusual plays, it's usually a mistake by your opponent that allows it to happen. But Trent Dilfer, 30 seconds to go in the half in Birmingham last week. Navy with the ball at their 25. They're just going to run it out, right? Or at least play prevent. Beat over the top for a 75-yard touchdown pass. So Navy, horrible by Dilfer, but also Navy showing you this is not your typical Navy passing attack, and it starts with Horvath. He's different from Reynolds. Reynolds and Perry, you get lucky if they throw 3 times a game. But this guy is actually throwing it a little bit more balance than we've seen in a long, long time. I don't want to go Roger Staubach, but you got to go back a long way to see this type of passing game for Navy, Paul.
Yeah, this new hybrid wing T offense has really fit the skill set of Blake Harvath. I mean, he's just having a tremendous season so far. And man, Navy's one of the, probably the biggest story among Group of Five teams. Certainly, it's been against an easy schedule, so maybe we should temper our enthusiasm a little bit. But man, it's been impressive. But what a difference! I like to say in these type situations, what a difference a month of games makes. In the preseason, Air Force would have been favored in this game right at 10 points. Now we've played 4 games or so. Air Force at home is getting 10.5 points. So just a complete turnaround, flip around there. As good as Navy has been, Air Force has not been. It's just incredible. And suffice it to say that Air Force has struggled immensely offensively. Only 1-3 on the season. Their only victory over FCS Merrimack. All 3 of their losses to FBS competition coming by double digits, so they really hadn't been competitive, those teams being Baylor, San Jose State, and Wyoming. And much of the Falcons' offensive woes, I think, can be attributed to an anemic rushing attack. When you talk about Air Force, you talk about a team largely due to their style of play, but a team that's going to be near the rushing leaders year in and year out in college football. But that's just not the case this year. They rank near the bottom in a number of key offensive categories, only averaging 9.7 points per game in their 3 games against FBS opponents, only averaging 3.8 yards per play, so averaging less than 4 yards per play, which is really, really low. You look at this team, talking about the rushing game, the last 5 years, Air Force has averaged 5 yards per carry rushing in each of the last 5 seasons. This year, averaging only 3.7 yards per carry. So just all those numbers just kind of give you an idea of how difficult this season has been for the Falcons to this point. Talking about Navy's quarterback again, Blake Harvath, who last year just looked, probably looked like I hate to say this, but a below average Navy quarterback. They really didn't have much offense with him at quarterback, but man, it has shifted this year. I think they're averaging maybe about 14 passes a game, so they're definitely catching you with those timely passes. Horvath, 14.5 yards per pass attempt, so 14.5 yards on average each time he throws it. A team high 450 yards rushing, and he averages 9.6 yards per carry, so averaging almost 10 yards a carry. All 4 of Navy's wins by double digits. And not only by double digits, but they've beat those 4 teams by an average of 22.5 points a game. They hadn't even been threatened. Certainly their most notable victory a couple of weeks ago over Memphis. I think that came the week after Memphis beat Florida State.
It was.
I think Navy's going to roll here. I mean, I just see, I know that Air Force has familiarity with Navy's offense, but not total familiarity. This is a different Navy offense, and I think Navy wins by 2 touchdowns or more.
In that game, they went up and down the field against Memphis, 566 yards and scoring 56 points. It was just back and forth. Yes, Air Force definitely. Zeke Daniels and Brad Roberts are in the rearview mirror. That's when they were at their best. They were as good as anybody. But this thing has flipped. They are struggling this year, and man, Horvath has really, really done a great job for the Middies. And I had Navy. And that game strictly a situational spot, but when I watch them, and this is against a Memphis defense, and listen, they were going to be way more fired up to play Florida State. They were looking at that. That was the only game they were going to be underdog in all year. That might be their toughest obstacle to get to the college football playoff, but they never, ever came close to stopping Navy in that game, and it was pretty much a 2-score lead the entire game. That's our best bets. Pros Paul Stone playing hurt for us. Pros play hurt. We appreciate Paul sticking it through us, giving us his top picks this week. We do it each and every week, the high-profile games in our best bets. For Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott on the Sports Bettor's Paradise on the Bet Rivers Network.